a sold-out hall in Galway, and a woman standing alone in half light. I'm Val. This is At the Stage Door from Opera Guide. That is how Testament begins. The new chamber opera from Irish National Opera and Galway International Arts Festival, with music by Tarek O'Regan and a libretto by Colm Toibín, adapted from his 2012 novella The Testament of Mary. Rachel Hewer directs, Elaine Kelly conducts. Sharon Carty carries the evening as Mary, with Deirdre Higgins as Martha. Frances O'Connor designed the set, Joan O'Clery the costumes, Kevin Treacy the lighting. 80 minutes, no interval, sung in English. I was there on opening night and I want to tell you what it is actually like because the descriptions in the listings, meditation on grief, memory, truth, are accurate and tell you almost nothing. Start with the players because the ensemble is the first surprise. There are 7 of them: violin, viola, cello, flute doubling piccolo, clarinet, and then mandolin and accordion. Mandolin and accordion in a passion story, 2 instruments that carry the smell of the street and the parish hall into a work about the crucifixion, and O'Regan uses them without a trace of irony. The result is a sound that never once reaches for the sacred. Harmonies slide, motifs surface and dissolve. The ensemble behaves less like an orchestra than like a crowd of people who will not leave the room, and they don't leave it. The musicians play inside the dramatic space, dressed in the same pastel robes as the singers, so the conventional boundary between pit and stage simply isn't there. The effect is quietly devastating. Mary is never alone on that stage. She is surrounded at every moment by the very people who are turning her son's death into a story. And the accordion sighs, that is the honest word for it. A mournful exhalation over and over under the voices. It caught me at its very first entrance, and I suspect that placement is deliberate. Think of the sound that carries a character backwards in almost every film you have ever seen. The shimmering harp, the soft dissolve, memory arriving as consolation. The accordion is doing that job here. It marks the hinge between Mary's present and her recollection, but it does it discordantly. The gesture is the familiar one. The comfort has been stripped out of it. And once you have heard that, the grammar of the whole opera is set. In this work, remembering is not a soft, focused retreat. It is something being done to her. It is worth remembering what an accordion physically is. It is a bellows. It cannot produce a note without drawing air in and letting it go. So, in a work about a mother recounting the death of her son, the ensemble's most persistent gesture is the sound of breath leaving a body. I don't know whether O'Regan intended that. I know it is what the instrument does, and I know I couldn't stop hearing it. I should say plainly that I did not come to this neutrally. My mother, who died last year, loved Mary, and loved her particularly because she saw something of herself in a woman with a difficult son. I don't know what she would have made of this production. I know that when the accordion breathed out, I briefly stopped being a reviewer. Which is, I think, the correct response to it, so let me go back to being one. Everyone on stage wears pastel. Mary wears black. And beneath the mourning robes, barely visible, the canonical blue. That costume is the whole production in one image. The blue is not erased. It is there, subordinated, pushed under the fabric of an actual grieving woman. This is not a Mary who has been modernized or made edgy. She is a mother who has lost her son and refuses to let anyone else own the loss. Now, Sharon Carty, her performance is built on stillness, which is the hardest thing to do on an opera stage and the easiest thing to undervalue. There is nowhere to hide in it, no gesture to fall back on, no business to fill a bar. Her voice moves from something close to whispered confession to a flat, steely refusal without ever losing the thread between them. The transitions are the remarkable part. You never catch her changing gear. And she does it in English to an audience that understands every word, which removes the last bit of protection a singer has. There is no surtitle doing half the work. If a line doesn't land, everyone knows. They all land. Then the crucifixion, which is not what you expect, and is the production's boldest decision. 2,000 years of Western art have trained us to see that hill as a hush. Three figures, a still crowd, grief arranged into composition. This is not that. It is chaotic. It looks less like anything hanging in a gallery than like footage from a city square during the Arab Spring. Noise, movement, a crowd, a public killing happening in the middle of other people's ordinary panic. I would argue it is also closer to what an execution actually is. Toibin's novella insists on the heat, the crowd, the scramble to get away. The staging takes him at his word. The horror is not that the death is solemn, the horror is that it isn't. And this is where Carty's stillness stops being a performance choice and becomes the argument. She is the one fixed point in it. Everything around her is in motion, the ensemble, the crowd, the men already beginning to arrange what they have seen into something they can use. And she does not move. There is a distinction worth naming here, because it is the difference between a good performance and this one. Carty understands that vulnerability and sentimentality are not the same thing. Her Mary is never asking to be pitied, she is asking to be believed. A word on the adaptation, because it is not an obvious one. Toibin's book is a monologue. Interiority, memory, a woman reconstructing events in private. The obvious risk in staging it is that interiority does not survive embodiment. What Hewer and O'Regan do instead is convert it. On the page, Mary remembers. On the stage, she relives. The pressure that silence carries in the novella is carried here by sound. The digressions tighten. The men who gather around the death become physically present, audible, insistent, rather than figures in recollection. It is not modernization. The production has no interest in updating the myth. What it does is far more uncomfortable. It puts the machinery of myth making on stage while it is still running, and asks you to watch a woman refuse it in real time. Toibin's libretto strips out ornament until the clarity itself becomes the provocation. Mary's resistance is not rhetorical. She simply declines the consolations of sanctity and declines them in front of people who badly need her to accept them. A note on where this sits. Irish opera has been changing for a decade now. Donncha Dennehy, Jennifer Walshy, and Gerald Barry have all pushed the form toward experiment and psychological realism. Testament belongs to that landscape, and it adds something the canon is short of. A work built entirely around an older woman's account of her own life, in a form that has historically preferred women who die beautifully in the third act. In a country where storytelling is cultural currency, an opera about who gets to control the narrative is not an abstract proposition. If you're going, and Testament comes to the Gaiety Theatre in Dublin the 8th to the 10th of October as part of Dublin Theatre Festival. 80 minutes, in English, no interval, and no spectacle to hide behind. Go expecting a chamber work that trusts text and silence more than it trusts scale. And you do not need to have read the novella first. The opera stands on its own, and Toibin's clarity survives the transfer intact. I'm Val. Opera is global, alive, and always worth listening to closely.